Well, looks like it's that time again. It is now April, and like clockwork, a new anime season is starting, with a bunch of exciting shows, remakes, continuations, adaptations, OVAs, movies, web series, and whoa! Have you ever stopped and just thought about how many different anime terms there are? It's almost like it's a different language. Wait a second, I know a different language. Often online or with people newly getting into the medium of anime, I see a lot of confusion and misunderstanding on what terms in reference to anime actually mean. There's a lot of reasons as to where this confusion comes from. One, it's a different language. A lot of the words that you see in regard to anime are, of course, Japanese. Two, I feel there is confusion between anime terms and Western animation terms because of the production pipeline, and just the industry in general is different. Some words don't translate perfectly between the two, and some are homographs, meaning they seem the same but actually have different definitions. So today I thought that I'd go through a bunch of common anime terms and clearly lay them out so that someone getting into anime can understand them, and so that things can be clarified for either personal use, online discussion, or when I use these terms in future videos of mine. I'm someone who is obviously a fan of anime, but I also love studying Japanese, and have done my degree in animation, so this is not only a subject I'm interested in, but also one I feel I'm able to properly explain with a degree of authority in it. So let's get started. What better word to start with than anime, of course? Surprisingly, I'd say this is the term that has the most confusion around it. It may seem deceptively simple, but people for decades now have gotten into heated debates on what this word really means. What is anime and what isn't, to the point that the word has become rather ambiguous. One thing to keep in mind with all of these words going forward is that a lot of the words aren't as cut and dry as you may think. Words and their practical uses are ever-changing and evolving. When trying to fit things into categories based on simple catch-all terms, it is difficult, and many things aren't going to fit cleanly under one alone. Plus, we're dealing with a different language, which has different cultural expectations and different uses within that language. It's all going to end up messy. The key point with the word anime that causes a lot of contention is the cultural context within how it is used. In the West, we tend to think of anime as being animated shows that are made in Japan, whereas in Japan, anime is simply a catch-all word for animation in general. So regardless of whether it is American, European, or Japanese, in Japan it would be fine to call it all anime in casual conversation. Yes, even The Simpsons could be considered anime in a Japanese context. But if you're watching this, you're most likely in the English-speaking world. For us, the word anime tends to hold a lot more weight. You often see things like anime style being brought up, and people debate what is and what isn't, and it differs depending on who you ask. To some people, what makes an anime is the visual aesthetics. Others, it's the tone, and for some it has to be made in Japan to be anime. However, none of these thoughts satisfy most. In the case of aesthetic, the majority of Western animation has now been inspired by anime to some degree. You'd be hard-pressed to find a show or film that doesn't feature a visual design choice that didn't originate in anime. Some shows, despite being made in, say, Texas or California, can be visually indecipherable from one made in Japan. The classic example of this is, of course, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Is that anime? Well, it certainly looks like one, but then on the contrary, we have shows in Japan that visually stand out from most anime, such as Panty and Stocking, and even simpler shows such as Chikawa, but in my eyes, these are undeniably anime. The same could easily be applied to tone and storytelling techniques. Neither one is exclusively Japanese or Western. Well, what if it's made in Japan? That should be pretty simple, right? Again, not really. Some people may not be aware of this, but during the 80s and 90s, a lot of Western animated shows had episodes outsourced to Japanese studios such as TMS, Topcraft, and hell, even well-known Ghibli animators worked on some of these episodes. Shows like Transformers, Scooby-Doo, the really old Hobbit movie, and even Batman the Animated Series had episodes or entire iterations made in Japan. And then does someone who's worked on the project have to be Japanese for it to be anime? What about anime that have Western animators that work on them? And a lot of anime these days even outsource work to Korea, China, or the Philippines, much like their American predecessors did in the 80s and 90s. The more you think about it, the harder it becomes to narrow down to the point it becomes impossible. So how I like to define it for myself, which may not work for you, is that I think of anime being animation made in Japan for Japanese audiences first and foremost. This tends to exclude a lot of the outsourced Western shows, and avoids the argument of what anime style is altogether. Even then, there are some discrepancies, such as Moomin, which was definitely made in Japan and is very popular in Japan with Japanese audiences, but is based on a Finnish book series and is just as iconic and well received in Europe. For something as broad as anime, there will never be a clear and easy way to define it. Just enjoy it for what it is and don't get too hung up on the trivial semantics of it all. I mean, really, anime is just a shortened slang version of animation, which is just the term for the medium as a whole, which every piece of animation, no matter where it was made, falls under. Manga. Surprisingly, unlike anime, the term for manga is pretty cut and dry. Manga just tends to be the term for comics made in Japan. There isn't much confusion like there is for anime, despite also having a lot of variety in art style. This is because of the format. You can always tell something is a manga because it will be read from right to left as opposed to left to right, since that is just how Japanese is read. Even when localized in English, this is something that is retained because it keeps the flow of the original paneling, which could completely break otherwise. A lot of anime you will watch will be adaptations of either manga or light novels. And then of course, the term for someone who creates a manga is a mangaka. Ekonte, our first actual production term. Ekonte are what storyboards are in Japanese. In case you don't know what a storyboard is, in animation, a storyboard is the initial rough drawings that establish the visuals and composition of a scene. It's kind of like telling the story through sequential drawings without the animated in-between parts that makes it all smooth, and without the polish that makes it a finished product. It is to get a rough idea of what the animation will look like and how it will be well timed. The detail and complexity of a storyboard and what's included in it can differ greatly from project to project and storyboard artist to storyboard artist. Some are very simple, like sticky note drawings, while others can be almost fully animated scenes just missing touch-ups, clean work, and color. Just like in the Western industry, the use of ekonte can vary greatly. However, there are usually some key distinctions. Rather than the left-to-right landscape orientation and format that Western boards are known for, ekonte are typically drawn in a vertical format from top to bottom, with dialogue on the right and timing even further from there. They're also usually really strict on the timing. Once it's decided in the ekonte, that's what it will be like for the whole project. To this day, a lot of ekonte are still drawn traditionally using pencil and paper, whereas in the West, digital boards tend to be more common, using software such as Storyboard Pro. Another difference is the number of people working on them. In Western productions, storyboards are usually made by dedicated artists, writers, and board revisionists. Whereas in Japan with ekonte, there tends to be a much smaller team working on it, sometimes even just the director does the ekonte entirely by themselves. Such is the case of people like Hayao Miyazaki. The term ekonte comes from the kanji e, which means picture or drawing, and a katakana version of continuity. As a side note, I like to collect the ekonte books for Studio Ghibli films drawn by Hayao Miyazaki. It includes some of my favorite art done by him because of how loose it looks and how he's really good at conveying what motion he wants through the simple drawings. Genga. Genga is a term used in anime to refer to keyframes, but it can also be a bit broader of a term than just that. In Western animation, typically keyframes refer to just the keyframes, i.e. the key poses or frames needed for the movement, plus extra frames like anticipations and overshoots. You then also get breakdowns, which could arguably be either a keyframe or an in-between, but it's kind of its own thing, hence the separate name breakdown. It serves as the skeleton for the movement and the animation. This also applies to anime with genga. However, genga also encompasses more of the early animation process as a whole. This includes the layout, which is based on the storyboards, but much more in detail, and has separate layout parts for the background, art, characters, effects, etc., as well as the tie-down process where things are cleaned up more. The director has checked over everything, and the final look of the characters and animation and how they will look and move has been decided. You've probably seen genga before, with the coloured penciling to showcase the highlights, shadows, moving parts versus stationary parts, and indicating what is visible between the genga and the final look. It's a bit of a confusing term since it encompasses a lot, but you can pretty easily remember it as being the keyframes. The term genga composes of the kanji for meadow, field, or in this case original, and the kanji for picture or brushstroke. So for genga, it could be translated as original picture or the key original drawings that make up the rest of the animation. Sete. Sete is a term that is used to refer to images in a production sense during the animation pipeline, such as characters, backgrounds, and props. It's pretty similar to model sheets in Western media, so it fills the role of having a basis for artists to use as a reference to keep things consistent across the whole animation. These sheets show you how something should be drawn, and what aspects have certain characteristics, such as shadows, highlights, blacks, and dividing certain features. They use the colors again that you'll see in genga. This is because sete is a part of the genga process. You'll have different sete for different scenes because of things like lighting and location. In the anime industry, there is actually a market for studios selling genga, sete, or reproductions of them for fans to purchase and collect. Kind of like how people would buy traditional animation cells and reproductions of them back in the day. The term sete itself is actually a word commonly used in Japanese, with the same kanji, that is unrelated to animation, which is settings, such as on a phone or device you'll see this word. It has the kanji for establishment and determined, which kind of fits the purpose of these drawings in the animation process. Doga. Finally, a simple term. Doga just refers to the in-between animation frames, which are those in between the keyframes and genga, so what makes the animation actually flow and not just be choppy. It also refers to cleanup or final clean line work of the animation. The Doga position or Dogaman role is typically the entry-level role within the anime industry. The word Doga itself also just means video in Japanese, since that's what the final animation is, but the kanji means moving and picture. Fairly self-explanatory, right? Seiyu. Seiyu means voice acting in Japanese. It goes across more than just anime, of course, since voice acting is a very wide industry of acting. I've included this here since you might see people refer to specific seiyu, since, like idols, they can sometimes have their own dedicated fan base. The kanji for seiyu literally contains voice and actor, so very self-explanatory there. Kantoku. Kantoku in Japanese means director. Pretty simple. I'm sure you all know what a director is in film and animation. For anime, I feel that it follows more of an auteur approach to direction compared to a lot of Western projects. For example, when you hear of big names in regard to anime, you almost always hear of the director. Hayao Miyazaki, Megumi Ishitani, Satoshi Kon, Mamoru Hosoda. This is because directors leave a lot more of an imprint on their work and have more telltale visual signs that they directed it. This is because of how involved they are, from creating the ekonte to genga supervision. Typically, an anime director is someone who has climbed up through the ranks in the industry, starting from doga work all the way up to the role of director. The word kantoku contains the kanji for oversee or official, and lead or command. This is because it's not exclusively a word used to describe anime, just like the word director in English. Seasons. When you hear this word in relation to anime, you may think of seasons like in a show, season 1, 2, 3. That isn't exactly the case though. For anime, it more often refers to the 4 seasons of the year. This is because of the yearly release schedule for anime. Every year, there are winter, spring, summer, and autumn seasons of anime, aside from ongoing shows which just run throughout. Most anime will start all around the same time at the beginning of the season, usually within the first week or so of a month. Say, for spring season, which we've just started, everything is starting in the first or second week of April. A season typically lasts 3 months, like it does in the real world, and shows fit around 12 to 14 episodes in that time. But you may be wondering, what is the term used for seasons of a show like you would find in Western television? That would be a core. While yes, cores and seasons can sometimes be used interchangeably, a core itself has a bit of a different definition. A core refers to that batch of 13 or so episodes of an anime that will air during a season. You may sometimes see a show having a 2-core run. This is when it goes across 2 seasons of the year back to back uninterrupted, and will typically have around 24 to 28 episodes before then going on break until the next season of that show airs in about a year or 2 usually. It's a little confusing, but you get used to it pretty quickly when you're watching shows. Examples of recent 1-core shows would be the Ranma Half remake, Makeine, and Dragon Ball Daima. And some recent 2-core shows are Frieren and Dungeon Meshi. A recent trend that I've noticed is that some shows will split their 2-cores across 2 seasons in a year, with a season in between where the show doesn't air. For example, the first core of Spy Family Season 1 aired in spring of 2022. It then took a break for summer, and the second core aired in the autumn season of 2022. You may think this would be Season 1 and 2 of Spy Family, but both are technically still Season 1. This keeps the show relevant throughout the year, prevents show fatigue for the viewer, and stops it from fading into obscurity as easily. Shonen. Shonen literally means boy in Japanese, so the shonen genre are anime that are targeted towards younger boys and teenage boys. Fighting or battle shonen are probably the most well-known subgenre within shonen, but the show does not by any means need to be about fighting to be a shonen show. Seinen. Seinen refers to young adult men, so as you can expect, it's for shows that are targeting a bit of an older audience. They may still have a lot of similar elements to shonen shows, but with a more mature tone and rating. Shoujo and Josei. The same rules and meaning applies to shoujo and josei, being the counterparts to shonen and seinen respectively for women. Shoujo being young girls and josei being adult women. Bangumi. Bangumi isn't an anime-specific term since it just means TV program, so it applies to anything on TV. I've decided to include it here because you've probably heard the phrase, この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りしました, which just means that the program is brought to you by these sponsors. It's very simple, but it will often play on Japanese TV right after the intro, and it's always very cheery and quite funny when it doesn't match the tone of the show it's playing in front of. Eiga. Eiga means movie in Japanese, so you'll have your TV anime or terebi anime, or even bangumi, and your anime movies in cinemas. And finally, OVA stands for Original Video Animation. These tend to be one-off specials that don't quite fit into a season or movie. Originally, they were intended for home release without airing on TV or in cinemas, but nowadays you'll get OVA filler episodes for series between seasons every now and then, or just one-off anime almost like a pilot episode to test the waters for a potential series. So that is a lot of terms. It's pretty overwhelming, but that's what language learning is about, and the animation industry in Japan, I feel, is kind of confusing, and there's a lot of lack of information on it online. I've tried to surmise things as best as I can, but I've probably made a few mistakes here and there, since I've never worked in the anime industry myself, or known many people who have worked in the industry there. Let me know if this was helpful to you though, or if you learned something new, or if I'm missing some very key words that would probably be helpful here. Let me know in the comments below, and if you do enjoy this kind of thing, please leave a like. It was fun to research this, since I do like anime and processes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you liked it, leave a like, and if you want to see more videos about anime, subscribe. Thanks for watching.